He wasn't just an enemy, he was family, an uncle. He was Abu Lahab, a man who could have stopped the Qur'an with a single lie. But he didn't. Why? Because what was revealed couldn't be undone. A fire was named, a rope was promised, and a surah, 5 verses long, sealed his fate forever. This is not a legend. This is the only man in history cursed by name in the book of Allah. And the fire, it didn't just burn, it spoke. Keep watching, because this isn't just a warning for him, and it's a warning for everyone who hears the truth and still walks away. Brethren, this is a call for support. As Muslim, please help us like and drop a comment to support this channel so we can keep creating more content for you. If you are ready, let's get into the video. The sun burned bright over the hills of Mecca. The ground was dry, the air was still, and then a voice rose from the mountaintop. It was Muhammad, calm, clear, and firm. He stood on Mount Safa, his eyes scanning the crowd below. He saw his people, his tribe, his family, his neighbors, gathering to listen. They knew him. For 40 years they had trusted him. They called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy. He raised his voice and asked, "O people of Quraysh, if I told you there is an army behind this mountain coming to attack you, would you believe me?" There was silence, then nods, then voices. "Yes, we never knew you to lie. You are Al-Amin. Of course we'd believe you." He looked at them again, not with pride, but with purpose. Then he said something that made their hearts tremble. "Then know this, I am a warner to you before a severe punishment." Eyes widened. Some leaned closer. He wasn't speaking like a poet. He wasn't telling a story. He was warning them about hell, about judgment, about a fire they had never seen. He wasn't calling them to war. He was calling them to truth. But suddenly, a voice cut through the silence, a familiar voice, a sharp voice. It came from his own uncle, Abu Lahab. He stepped forward, his face red with anger. "May your hands perish. Is this why you brought us here?" The crowd turned to look, but some were shocked. Some laughed nervously, but the prophet didn't flinch. He didn't shout back. He didn't curse. He just stood there, calm, patient, trusting in his Lord. Abu Lahab's words echoed down the valley. His voice was filled with mockery. His heart was filled with pride. He didn't care what Muhammad had to say. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want to understand. He only wanted to stop the message. And then he turned around and walked away. People began to whisper. Some shook their heads. Others followed him, laughing as they went. But in the sky above, a surah had already descended. A reply from Allah himself. It would not come from Muhammad's lips as his own. It was revelation, pure, final, everlasting. Perish the hands of Abu Lahab, and perish he. Qur'an 111:1. The mountain was quiet again, but the air had changed. Something eternal had just happened. A man tried to stop the truth with words, and Allah responded with a chapter of the Qur'an. The prophet did not defend himself. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't curse back. He let the Qur'an speak. And that one verse, just 5 words, crushed Abu Lahab's insult forever. The people didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something huge. The call had been made. The truth had been told. The fire had been warned about. And even though one man mocked it, millions would one day believe it. Because the voice on the mountain wasn't just a man, it was a prophet, chosen by Allah. And when the Qur'an speaks, it does not echo. It stays. The insult still hung in the air. Abu Lahab's words had pierced the gathering like a spear. "May your hands perish. Is this why you gathered us?" And then he turned his back and walked away. The crowd slowly began to scatter, confused, shaken, some amused. But the prophet stood still, silent. He had spoken the truth, And when truth is mocked, Allah responds. That night the sky opened. A revelation came down. Sharp, direct, unstoppable. Perish the hands of Abu Lahab, and perish he. Qur'an 111:1. It wasn't the prophet's reply. It was Allah's. The one who created the tongue now condemned the one who used it to curse his prophet. Abu Lahab's hands, once strong with wealth, power, and pride, were now named for destruction. His wealth and whatever he earned will not benefit him. Quran 111:2. He had gold, he had servants, he had status in Mecca. But when he used all of it against the truth, none of it mattered anymore. All his treasure was now trash in the eyes of Allah. He thought his power could protect him. He thought his money could silence the prophet. But this verse, this divine sentence, declared him powerless. Then came the verdict. He will burn in a fire of blazing flame. Quran 111:3. A fire not like the desert sun, not like the torches of Quraysh, but a fire that burns souls, a fire that listens to the command of Allah and never stops. Abu Lahab, the man with a hot temper and a red face, was now promised a fire hotter than anything he ever knew. And it didn't stop with him, because in the background, another figure was fanning the flames. Her name was Jamil, his wife. She wasn't quiet. She wasn't innocent. She hated the prophet just as much as her husband. She used her mouth like a knife. She walked the streets with poison in her words. She carried thorns and sharp wood and scattered them where the prophet would walk. But Allah saw her, and he spoke about her too. And his wife, the carrier of firewood, Quran 111:4. She wasn't helping her husband in love. She was helping him in hatred. And just like him, she would face the flame. Around her neck will be a rope of twisted palm fiber. Quran 111:5. The one who raised her voice against the messenger, the one who walked proudly in Mecca with expensive jewelry around her neck, would one day walk in the hellfire, choked by a rope, twisted from the very palm fibers she used to harm. This wasn't just a curse, it was a sealed judgment, a surah, 5 verses long, set in stone. And here's what made it more terrifying. Abu Lahab heard it. He lived years after it was revealed. He had plenty of time to pretend to accept Islam, just to prove the Quran wrong. But he never did. He couldn't. Because the Quran isn't poetry. It isn't guesswork. It's the word of Allah. And when Allah says someone will burn, they burn. The surah lived. Abu Lahab died. He died with the curse still wrapped around him, just like the rope around his wife's neck. This wasn't just a warning for Quraysh. This was a message for the world. You can mock the messenger. You can hate the truth. You can fight the light. But when Allah speaks, you lose. Because pride may raise your voice, but it will never save your soul. The sun rose over Mecca, but the hatred in some hearts was darker than night. In the narrow alleyways behind the prophet's home, she walked. Jamil, the wife of Abu Lahab. Her hands clutched bundles of dry thorn branches. Sharp, twisted, painful. She wasn't just carrying wood. She was planting traps. She scattered the thorns across the prophet's path, the one he would take to pray, to preach, to call to Allah. The thorns were silent, but her voice wasn't. She spat curses. She spread lies. She whispered slander into the ears of every person she met. He's a madman. He's dividing families. He's cursing our gods. And behind her venomous tongue, her eyes burned with rage. She was a woman of wealth, of status. Jewels once danced on her neck. Gold once shone on her fingers. But now all she wore was hatred. Every day she carried thornwood. Every night she whispered to Abu Lahab, fueling his anger like firewood to a flame. You can't let him win. He's embarrassing you. He's destroying your name. And Abu Lahab listened. 2 hearts, 1 war. But they weren't just fighting a man. They were fighting revelation. Then, The whispers reached her ears. "There is a surah about you." She stopped. A surah? From Allah? About her? She stormed through the market like a storm cloud. Face twisted, hair flying, lips curled. In her hand, a stone. Her voice echoed, "Where is Muhammad? Where is your so-called prophet?" She gripped the stone tightly, not to build, but to break. She reached the Kaaba, eyes wild, but the prophet was standing there, calm, still, next to Abu Bakr. And yet, she didn't see him. Allah had veiled her vision. She passed by, her curses falling into nothing. She hurled threats at Abu Bakr. "Your companion has insulted me. If I find him, I'll crush his mouth with this rock." But the prophet remained untouched. Her eyes were open, but her heart was blinded. That night, the streets of Mecca were quiet, but she wasn't. She returned to her firewood, stacking thorn upon thorn. But now, in the unseen world, her judgment had already been written. His wife, the carrier of firewood. Qur'an 111:4. She thought she was clever. She thought she was strong, but she didn't realize she was fulfilling her own curse, carrying firewood in this world, and one day, in hell. Only this time, it wouldn't be thorns for the ground. It would be fuel for her own fire. And the gold necklace that once hung around her neck, it would be replaced by a rope of twisted palm fiber. Qur'an 111 verse 5. Tight, burning, eternal. The woman who wanted to silence the prophet was now remembered in every single recitation of the Qur'an, forever known, not as Jamil, but as the woman of firewood. Because when you burn with hate, you become the fuel for your own flame. The surah had already spread, from the mouths of children to the whispers of the elders. Everyone in Mecca had heard it. "Perish the hands of Abu Lahab, and perish he." The words were sharp, final, unforgettable. But the man they named, he still walked the streets, angry, boiling, alive. Abu Lahab. He had heard it. He had heard every word of the surah, the divine sentence against him. He clenched his fist when it was recited. His face flushed red like fire every time someone mentioned it. He hated it, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't, because deep down, he knew. This wasn't poetry. This wasn't rumor. This was revelation. He sat in his courtyard under the shade of a fig tree, gripping a cup of wine. But the drink tasted bitter. The same servant boy who once feared him now looked at him with silent pity. Even his own friends whispered behind his back, "Why doesn't he just say he believes?" If he accepted Islam now, wouldn't it prove the prophet wrong? He could make the Qur'an false. And that was the challenge. A surah had been revealed saying he would never believe. If he had just said, "I believe in Allah and His Messenger," the Qur'an would be invalid. The message would collapse. He had the power to destroy Islam with a single lie, but he didn't. Because his arrogance was deeper than his fear. His hatred was stronger than his pride, and his soul already chained to fire. At night he tossed in his sleep. He saw fire in his dreams. He saw ropes. He heard his wife's voice, screaming from the flames, her neck bleeding from palm fiber. He woke up sweating, but he never bowed his head. In public, he laughed loudly. He cursed the prophet. He mocked the reciters. But in private, he was silent. Not once, in all the years after the surah was revealed, did he try to disprove it. Not once did he stand in front of the people in fake belief. Because he knew his wealth will not benefit him. Qur'an 111:2. He had money, but it brought no peace. He had slaves, but none could carry his curse. He had power, but not over death. The words of the surah followed him like a shadow. Every time the Qur'an was recited, he was exposed. Every time a child memorized it, his humiliation grew. And yet, he chose silence. He chose pride. He chose hell. Years passed. Abu Lahab grew sick. Boils covered his skin. Fever gripped his body. His breath turned foul. His own sons abandoned him, afraid of the disease, or maybe the curse. He died alone. rotting, forgotten, disgraced. No one dared touch his body. It lay in the heat for days, swelling, stinking. In the end, his corpse was dragged with sticks and thrown into a pit. Rocks were hurled until he was covered. No prayer, no honor, no legacy. But the surah, it still lives. Abu Lahab could have made the Qur'an false, but he didn't. He couldn't. Because the Qur'an was, and always will be, true. And sometimes the most powerful proof of truth is not in who believes, but in who refuses to, even when they could have lied. He was buried without a prayer, without a farewell. Abu Lahab, once a chief of Quraysh, a man of gold and status, was now a rotting body buried with sticks. No one carried him on their shoulders. No one wept. Even his own son stayed far away. They said his skin had cracked. They said his body had burst. They said the stench was unbearable. But the worst had not even begun, because his death was not the end. It was the beginning of what Allah had promised. In the unseen world, the fire waited, a fire not born from wood or oil, but from the wrath of the Most High. He will burn in a fire of blazing flame. Qur'an 111:3. The same tongue that mocked revelation, the same hands that fought the prophet, the same heart that refused to bend, now felt the heat. This fire was not silent. It spoke. It knew him. On the day when their enemies will be gathered to the fire, until when they reach it, their hearing, eyes, and skins will testify against them. Quran 41:19-20. His own body turned witness. His skin screamed, "He used me to fight the truth." His ears cried out, "He blocked me from hearing the Quran." His eyes said, "He turned me away when the signs were clear." And then the flame spoke. It wrapped around him. It burned him, not just his flesh, but his pride. This was the fire that Abu Lahab fed in life, with his hatred, his arrogance, his defiance. And now it was his companion. Beside him, his wife appeared, Jamil, the carrier of thorns. But this time, she wasn't throwing wood. She was carrying it for real, stacking it high on her back, her shoulders torn and bleeding. And around her neck, not a necklace of gold, but a rope, twisted, burning, tight. The more she screamed, the tighter it pulled. The more she resisted, the heavier the wood became. This was her reward. This was her rope, not made by man, made by justice. But the fire didn't just burn them. It spoke to the world, to every generation that would come after. It whispered to kings and beggars alike. This is the end of those who fight the truth. The surah lived on. 5 verses, short and sharp. Children memorized it. Worshippers recited it. And every time the surah was read, the fire was mentioned again. Perish the hands of Abu Lahab. His wealth will not help him. He will burn in a fire. His wife, the carrier of firewood, with a rope of palm fiber on her neck. This was no fable. It was a living warning that even family ties to the prophet mean nothing.